everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed clinician specializing in anxiety and anxiety disorders. So for those of you who are new to the Fearcast, this is typically a question and answer based podcast where you can send me questions about anxiety disorders, treatment of it, how it starts, what you can do to help. If you have a family member who's struggling with it, what you can do to help them in their journey as well. So if you have a question for a future episode, go to fearcastpodcast.com and you can send me a message over there through the submit a question link. You can also send me an audio question, and either through a shared Google Drive, record it onto your phone, your computer, wherever, and share the link to it through a Google Drive or wherever, and that will get you to the top of the list and likely put you up on that next week's episode. The reason for the preferential treatment, and I somewhat apologize for it and somewhat don't, is that I just think that your voice is so much more interesting than mine, and having you read it yourself connects a person to the struggle and then connects somebody else to you. So that's the whole point of all this, is to try to create a community for people to help one another, to learn from one another's struggles, and what you can all do to help propel your life back to the life that you want to be living. So today is going to be a bit of a departure from the typical question and answer format. I have JSalvador on. He is an artist, and I'll introduce him just shortly, but this will be another installment in the Anxiety in the Arts series. So Jay was so generous to meet with me today and to chat about his experience with anxiety and other mental health issues as he got into art, what it was like to fully shift over his life to then being a full-time artist, and just how anxiety has driven his career, and has driven and influenced his career. And what he is doing to work on that. So I'm going to include some kind of commentary at the very end. Regular listeners of this show will hear some things in there that might perk up their ears, or might be similar to things like things related to anxiety and other things that we do talk about. So I'll add some bits at the end of that. And I spoke with Jay about that, but in our conversation didn't feel the need to bring it up until afterwards. So, but just a little bit about Jay before we jump into it. JSalvador is an artist, cartoonist, and graphic designer based in Los Angeles, California. He's the creator of Super Emo Friends, a comic series that reflects the deeper side of our favorite comic and pop culture character. You can find his work at superemofriends.com, as well as Super Emo Friends on Instagram and Twitter. So, without further ado, here's my interview with JSalvador.
But I've been an artist my whole life since I was a kid. I have drawings from when I was like 5 years old, mostly like zombies and Grim Reapers, because my dad loved watching horror films, and that was all fun, and just playing video games and coming up with monsters and all that kind of stuff my whole life. Just drawing comics through junior high and high school. But also got into, Photoshop and digital graphics and animation, and I was studying animation, and it just seemed like I'm going to be an animator. Like everything is here. This is what I'm into. So I went to school for animation a little bit, and but then I didn't really want to spend a lot of money on school, so I never had a proper educational privileged background of hey, this is how you go into college and all this stuff. So I just kind of ended up fiddling around. I did become a musician too in high school, and playing music. I think playing music was probably one of the first ways that I just remember my heart pounding one time I'm on stage playing, and just super nervous and freaking out, and then after a while it was just gone, And I think after that, like I know a lot of people have stage fright or whatever. I also did some theater, so like that kind of stuff was just gone. I wasn't really ever afraid of being up on stage. So as an artist, a performer and stuff, I felt like safer there than I did as like a person just in a room meeting people. But yeah, so the music was a nice, that's the art form that I never really had anxiety in anything along the way. It was just kind of like, I guess just to start the whole thing off is like my main source of anxiety is really more about like who I really am versus what my art is. So one time I was at this gallery and talking to this lady, and we're just looking at this art. And like, yeah, I love this artist. This is great stuff. And she's just like, he's also a really amazing person. And that's always the best thing when you find out like your favorite artists are good people too. And I was just like, oh, and I can feel myself just like tingling thinking about it, because it was like, whoa, so if person is not a good person, then their art is not going to be successful. So that gave me like the most anxiety. It's like, it's almost like, I don't know, in religion, I guess there's a form of anxiety of like, you're going to go to hell if you're a bad person, right?
Yeah.
Like that was all like turned into, if I'm a bad person, my art is not going to sell.
Oh my goodness, the pressure.
Yeah, it kind of became like a social pressure on like, oh man, I have to be a perfect person. I can't screw anything up. I can't offend people. I can't make people cry. I can't break girls' hearts. I can't be a bad person. Like, and so everything that I experience in my relationships, mostly in romantic relationships, are usually the ones that are kind of rocky. Also, work relationships, I don't really do well with in all work relationships. I just try to do my job, bro. I don't need to be your friend, so
yeah,
kind of stuff like that. That gives me the greatest amount of anxiety. But what happened basically was I ended up working in Hollywood after college, and just I started painting to get away from the computer screen, to rest my eyes and to be consistent and creative, and I always want to make something. That's another form of anxiety, is like I can't just sit still. I want to be like making things all the time. Normal people that are like, we should be working on something, guys. I don't want to just sit here and watch TV. And even when I lived with your brother and we would just sit there and watch TV, I'm like, I have to go paint, guys. I'm sorry. So
is it to that as a bit of a side note, was that specifically like you need to be doing something creative, or it's like you just need to be doing something, like if you were like, I don't, like picking something up or like putting together a model, or was it specifically like an artistic expression that you felt drawn to?
Yeah, it was a little bit kind of like not so much about expression as it is I'm not using my talent,
Okay.
It's like you have your Porsche 911 in the garage and you only drive it once a year kind of thing. And I'm like, so that was it, my anxiety of like, I have to go make something. Like, I'm talented with this. I have to keep making something. And that might affect my feelings about talented people that aren't using their talents.
Perhaps. Was that kind of duty driven, or was it kind of desire driven? Like I want to drive my Porsche, as opposed to like, I've got it, I guess I've got to drive it.
Well, it's a little bit of both, I think.
Okay.
You enjoy it, that's for sure. And I do want to get better at it. But it also is that like, I can do anything. I can do this.
Right.
And I want to do this. So it was just the way I kind of just ended up dealing with, well, I want to keep making stuff, but I don't want to sit on this computer and burn my eyes out. So
Yeah.
let me canvases and some paints. And then I did some paintings and they came out really good. And I was like, whoa. And I hadn't painted since I was like a teenager. And by this time I was about like 25 or 26. And I was like, wow, I can paint. Like, I want to see more of what I can paint. I imagine things and it's like, I'm going to paint them. And so I just come up with stuff like that. And then moving to LA, I mean, I was in LA, so I was at the galleries, trying to get into galleries because I was like, this is the natural progression, right? You do a painting and you just want it up in a gallery. You want to hang out with other artists. I wasn't going to be an art major. I was a film major because I felt like art school was really expensive and like pretentious, and it was like a solo act, whereas school it felt a little bit more like industrial and you a job and collaborate with people. But being a painter, I was like, how am I going to pass this class? Like, what's my thesis? And nowadays, I could probably pull it off. Back then, I was like, I'm not interested in going to art school. But yeah, so getting into the galleries and then my art was just kind of like, there was a class I took on the problems of capitalism, and there's a chapter about how we make hamburgers out of like these cows and how much energy goes into feeding the cow and running the farm and all the stuff that goes on with the antibiotics and the pollution and all to get like a little hamburger. And that gave me a lot of anxiety. I had like this kind of like, oh my God, like the world is just falling apart. Like everything is being destroyed. So I ended up kind of channeling that anxiety into my painting. So I came up with like one of my paintings is Ronald McDonald on a pile of garbage and bones and he's just crying. And like that made me feel like I did something about it. Like,
Yeah.
Like the anxiety of like, this is a powerless feeling of this system that's out there. And I was like, well, how can I destroy the fast food industry? And I'm like, well, I can do paintings of like what the fast food industry looks like to me, like in a cute way, but in a dark way. And I also did a series that I called Commercial Fatigue, which was just the idea of like mascots that have aged and that have gotten old or like just kind of been worn down by their oppressive bosses. And so I started painting that. So a lot of my work was definitely just my anxieties or the things that bothered me.
Yeah.
How I felt like once a painting was finished, and let me see if I haven't taken this off the wall for a couple of years, but this was one of the first paintings. And I don't know if you remember the paintings that I was doing.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen that one.
Yeah, so this piece was it's just about like, I mean, he's just staring at this spoon, like this is what he does for a living. He just eats cereal and gets kids to just like eat this sugar.
Right. As this is an audio medium, I'll describe it. It's a picture of it's a painting of Tony the Tiger looking really defeated and forlorn, I would say, just kind of staring like with a hint of like, I don't know, animosity towards this spoon.
Yeah. And it's just a portrait. I love portraits. So, but after I painted it, I was like, oh, I feel like I've relieved my anxieties. And this is the one painting that I was like, I'm going to keep this painting because this is kind of the painting that I did that made me feel like, oh, I'm a painter. I can paint. Like, I should take this seriously. So, but all the other ones have sold, and I'm very happy that they sell. But yeah, it's just kind of like through that anxiety, through that medium, I was like, okay, this is why I'm going to paint. Is to just kind of channel my feelings out.
Yeah.
So I did other little cartoons in there, just based on feelings, and things that like stressed me out or worried me, or either that or made me laugh. But eventually, I was having relationship troubles, and I had this moment where I was like, I need to break up. I can't be in a relationship. I have to focus on all these things that I need to learn. So that's another big form of anxiety that kind of wrecks my relationships. I'm like, what am I doing? Like just going out to dinner and cuddling, and hanging out with women all the time. Like I should be learning stuff. I should be working. I should be painting. So like being an artist has just always pushed me like out of relationships, because I'm like, why am I acting like a normal like breeder? Like I don't know, like these negative terms that are in my head over relationships, where women are like, well, stop painting and like come over here, and like stuff like that. So there was this one relationship I ended because I was like, sorry, I really need to get out of this and focus on painting and learning this software program and getting better work and all this kind of stuff. So I felt really terrible about about that, and I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, it's over, and broke her heart. And she's like, what? Like, what is going on? And so I felt so bad. I'm like, oh man. And then I came up with very super emo friends, and it was just like Batman. It was just this sketch that my friends and I had kind of come up with. It's like Batman sad that his parents are dead, and it's very simple, everybody knows it. It's like Batman saying my parents are dead, but I did a cute little drawing of it with that quote, and just like the painting with a quote down there.
And I'll post some of your art, if that's all right, to the episode page.
But from that feeling, I was just kind of like, whoa, like this is cheering me up. Like how Batman is sad. Like, well, my parents are alive. Like I was like, I just dumped my girlfriend. And then I thought like, well, Spider-Man misses Uncle Ben. And then I thought of like other characters that were superheroes that everybody knew.
Mm-hmm.
There are these superheroes with like talented people, basically, right? People with talents that are miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Something just isn't perfect. Like they're not that super. They're human after all, kind of thing. And so I ended up painting 6 Marvel characters, 6 DC characters, because it just kind of like came out of nowhere, just in this depression and anxiety that I was having. And I was like, okay, well, cool. Maybe people will buy these paintings. And before I could even sell them, I showed them to people, like, hey guys, I'm not feeling the best right now, but here's some paintings I did. And everybody's like, how much for that one? How much? Hey, I want all of these. Like, are you going to sell prints of these? I want a copy of this. And I was like, whoa, what? I was like, but they're sad. Like, who wants to buy this sad stuff? Like, this many people want this? And so a buddy at work was like, yeah, dude, this is how you do it. Scan them, go to a printer, get them printed out, put them on your online store, number them, sign them. I was like, okay, I guess. So I did that, and then, I wasn't like a viral person on the internet. This was 2009. All I had was like Facebook, really, and a little bit of YouTube. But then I sent it to a blog, because back before TikTok and Instagram, there were blogs, and so the blog that I loved following, it didn't stuff, but I was like, hey, I painted these things. Here's some prints available. I don't know if you like it, but yeah, show your fans. So he was like, these are great. He posted them, and then it went viral. Like, it sold out of everything in a day.
Wow.
In Europe and Guatemala and yeah, Europe is basically Australia, Canada. It was just crazy. I'm just shipping these things all over the world, and that's when I was like, something big just happened. So I bought superemofriends.com and just said, well, okay, let me paint more of them. And then I just thought up more characters that have more, like, grievances and sadnesses and ironic kind of twists to the sadness.
Yeah.
Keeping it funny in the sense there is this Wile E. Coyote sense of Schadenfreude where you're like, you find pleasure in somebody else's pain,
Uh-huh.
I had this fine tightrope to walk, but everybody really just connected with that. And that just was a surprise to me. I had no idea that it was going to become like a big deal, and that I was going to be able to quit my day job and make money on art like that. So the anxiety of like, how am I going to be a good person and a good artist and all that kind of stuff was just kind of like, boom, everybody loved me. And I was like, whoa, we love your art. We love you. And I'm like, guys, these drawings look like a kid drew them. This, because you saw the Tony the Tiger.
Yeah.
The style of the Emo Friends, which is just like a little cartoon.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be like this great portraiture artist, but everybody is buying this instead.
Right.
Okay, I guess I'm doing this now. So
did that feel like a letdown? That like you're trying to do like high, in a sense, I'm going to put it in quotes, high quality portraiture, but the things that you're doing are more comic based.
Yeah, simple, and anybody could do it really. But what's flattering is that a lot of people ended up just kind of, there's a lot of fan artists, so people started drawing them too, and it's like, oh wow, I guess this is more tangible for people. You know what I mean? Like the portraiture is darker and scarier and moodier, and this just kind of opens up, and kids, they're really attracted to it too.
Mm-hmm.
So through that, it just kind of became like, it's confusing. I'm like, oh wow, am I like a good person now? Am I an amazing person now? And so there's a lot of like, just kind of enjoying my life and being very happy because of these guys and the success of the sales and going to conventions and selling out and meeting people like, oh my God, these are the most amazing things I've ever seen. These are genius. And then therapists would come up and buy them. So I made friends with therapists who were like, yeah, these are great in my office with my kids. And really to talk. And I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, so it just opened up this whole world of mental health that I was just making fun of these characters. But I found out that I was a bully, like I was bullying. I was the laughing at somebody else's pain and not actually offering them help, which gave me some anxiety too, because I'm like, oh man, how do I use my art to actually help people and not just make fun of, sadness? Because normalizing depression is kind of the catchphrase that I heard about my art.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, that's cool. Like, everybody's sad. This guy's sad, that guy's sad, like your favorite characters are sad. And there's no harm, no foul, because these are all fictional characters. It's like if I did this with a real person, that's when it gets like really touchy, So it's like, if I'm going to make fun of somebody's depression, I don't think that's going to fly. But if I can make fun of a cartoon character's depression, okay, this is interesting. This is a way to So people are just like, I don't know if I want to laugh or if I want to cry. Like, so a lot of people are confused. It kind of became a social experiment in a sense.
Yeah.
And
I find it interesting, that line where this kind of this mindset where you say like you're kind of the bully towards these characters. I'll pick on the Batman one since that's the one you shared. That it feels like you're perhaps bullying Batman in the sense that he's sad that his parents are dead, but it's like, yes, we commonly, like, of course he's sad, and it recognizes it does normalize that he can and perhaps even should feel sad. Because how is that? What? Tell me about it, like that push and pull of you feeling like you're kind of bullying them, whereas other people have been saying, "Gosh, this is really validating," Batman's experience.
Yeah, I mean, it really, that puts it in this art category where it kind of is interpreted however somebody reads it and connects to it, I think. Like for me, yeah, I was more in a sarcastic kind of tone, and like, haha, look at poor Batman over there with dead parents. But also like, well, I could see somebody being like, wow, this is like his kryptonite, like this is his weakness, like this is his parents, and I know a lot of people that have lost their parents that actually that's like obviously like one of their favorite pieces, because they can relate to Batman. It empowers them. They're like, well, look at Batman. He's an orphan, and like, look how successful he is. So for me, just seeing how it kind of takes on its own life in a public space, and for everybody to interpret it, that's fascinating to me. And I'm not going to be like, sometimes I'll joke, I'm like, it's not funny, guys, like just kind of throw that out there, because like,
yeah,
I'll stand in front of my table and just be laughing, and everybody comes over like, what's so funny, and then it kind of changes the mood too, because I've been at shows where people will see it and they're like, what is that? And they just walk away, right? But if somebody there is laughing at it, and then they walk up and they're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like there's some sort of weird like hive mind that goes on when my art is on display, because the more of them that you see, the more of a collective joke it becomes, or a collective commentary on what depression is or what sadness is, and the spectrum of sadness. And like, well, this is funny in a like a cute sad way, and this is like really, really sad. But some people will buy things that are really sad, and some people will buy things that are funny. So it's been like just this exploration of feelings that are kind of deemed negative. If you don't want to be sad, don't act sad, cheer up, kind of thing. So it's just been really awesome, because it's opened up this world of mental health that I think mental health is kind of becoming a fad again, or at least in online and things I follow, like people are craving for it, especially after COVID. So I'm kind of like, well, how do I figure my art into this world? How can it kind of go there? So that's what I've been working on right now. It's trying to figure out the step outside of the emo friends as a collection of art. And I'm like, well, what other things could I produce that kind of have the same kind of like aesthetic or texture to it, where we're talking about feelings, but we're using artwork. And so I did illustrations for a therapist who they wrote a book doing a lot of mental health stuff, but kind of wrapping it in pop culture and in fandom. That was fun, and so I was like, okay, I'm on this path. And then so talking to you, a therapist, about this, so, okay, great, my art is like in this atmosphere now. So I also like my business card. This is my business card. It's actually a pack of tissues. Tissues for your issues on it.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
This is just always connects with people, and they're just like, when they're coming up to my booth and they're just like, oh my God, they're like being emotional, like usually in a happy, fun way. It's not like, I've only sent a couple women off crying, but it's like they understand. Like that's what's powerful about art, But I've always thought like, oh, I need to be able to hand out tissues to people that are like, I'm gonna cry, because it cheers them up instantly, and they're just like, what the hell? Like, you're giving me a pack of tissues with your art on it, and it's been really fun. So I've just been really enjoying it, and during COVID, like I ended up having a breakup situation with the girl that I had living with me, and she couldn't go anywhere, so it was a tough breakup. But that it was during that time that I really kind of went a little loco, got a little super depressed, and had tons of suicidal feelings and wanting everything to just like end and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I found myself kind of just looking at the emo friends and just like, well, like there's a world out here that people are familiar with. I'm not the only one out here, because I understood that depression is a worldwide experience and a daily occurrence. Whereas I'm like, oh my God, I'm depressed, I'm going to die. Like this is a disease now, my life is over. So being able to find some mental health tools and really start diving into mental exercises and cognitive therapy, it was a good time, because coming out of it, I feel a lot better. And I think that my next production, I actually had a meeting about a production last night. It's very guided by the success of Super Emo Friends and the audience that are like open to mental health. And but anxiety was all just kind of part of the trajectory of art. So it's like, okay, well, I need to have anxiety again so I can figure out the next step, I guess. So the breakup it's usually like, that's the problem. It's like, it's usually relationships with women that are inspiring my art. That's it's not good.
Well, it could be argued that it is good. Gibson, the guitar company, a bunch of years ago, part of their advertising campaign said, "She loves you, she hates you. Either way, you have a song."
Oh yeah,
it kind of resonates with this. But what I love about the Super Emo Friends is that it requires you to really put yourself in the position of the character and to really understand what it is that they really want, what they really value, and that they ultimately can't have. There is this, but there is that sadness that they have, and I think that we all kind of think about the things that we desperately want. And it just seems so close, but a million miles away. I mean, one of the prints you held up was Mogwai from Gremlins, looking very sad, and it says, "I need a bath." And if you've ever seen the movie, it's you can't get them wet, otherwise they multiply. But you could see it's incredibly sad that everyone tells him, don't get him wet, and that's the one thing that he desperately wants is a bath. And gosh, think about the thing that you want, whatever that thing is for you, and and that's kind of reflective, in all the other Super Emo Friends. But it requires a tremendous amount of acknowledgement of. And empathy for someone else's pain. I think that's where it comes. That there may be that line where someone thinks you're bullying them, but the other part is it takes a lot of empathy to put yourself in the shoes of Mogwai and go, yeah, man, if I was him, of course that's the one thing I want.
That's a really I think empathy is the biggest word right there. Is that practicing empathy is something that ironically, like I feel like I don't really have a lot of.
Mm.
So when you say that, it's like, oh wow, yeah, I guess I do have. Because sometimes I mean, it was just I had to look at a lot of my behaviors in my relationships, and just catching myself and just, like beating myself up, like wow, why was I so mean? Like why was I so, you know, non-sympathetic? Why do I lack empathy? Why don't I care about this person? I had to explore all that kind of stuff. So it's just like a weird, and that gives me like, man, like if my ex-girlfriend told people how I made her feel, you know, it's like that's the end of my career. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, should I not be in a relationship? Is that what's going on? So it all kind of comes back to this kind of weird uh, weird feeling that I get when I'm in a relationship.
You've kind of alluded to that element of kind of moral perfection, that like your personal and moral perfection is uniquely tied to your commercial success, or just in the development of your art. I mean, where did that come along, and how have you tried to challenge or push against that association?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably started when John Lennon said that they were, you know, that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus, and then everybody went out and burned their records.
Uh-huh.
I feel like, oh, that's something that happens. You know, cancel culture is very prevalent today. Say one wrong thing on Twitter and, you know, lose everything. So, like, sandwiched between these events, it's just kind of like, yeah, like I really think that my artwork it should be a reflection of of who I am. It's like, this is a perfect painting in every way. Like, I finished this painting, here it is, it's available for purchase. There's nothing wrong with it. So it's like, I made it perfect. It's like a meal, right? It's like almost like if you had the best steak in the world, but you found out the chef or the butcher or whatever, you know, like they're like these horrible, disgusting people, and you're just like, oh, I'm not eating there again, you know. So like that I guess I use as, like I mentioned, religion as a way of moral compass. Yeah, like, well, I want to be a better person because I want to be a better artist. I want my art to do well. I want to be more successful. And any time that I was not a good person, or any time that I made a mistake, it was kind of like, oh man, I've just doomed myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to be successful if I'm making girlfriends cry all the time. If I make a girl cry, that's going to be the end of my career. I'm not going to be successful. But that feeling, I think it's a valid feeling. I think I should really look at, like, hey, maybe don't make girls cry.
Right.
Well, what's going on there? Why? How is this happening? But I mean, I make a lot of girls laugh too, so you can't please everybody.
That's very true. But man, it almost sounds like that line of like, I also make girls laugh. Like that gets, you know, kind of thrust down to the bottom, and just you kind of pull up this one moment that you made this girl cry. And it's like, see, this is why I'm garbage and why everything's going to be thrown away. The kind of the magnification of this, you know, really unwanted interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, the flip side is also, how are you to be in relationships with other people and not make them upset?
Yeah, I guess it's normal, right? And that's kind of the other thing too. Like, sometimes I think of other forms of art or another series of art, and one of them being like, yeah, when couples fight, you know, like, what does that look like? But that's an ugly picture. So I thought, well, what if I made super emo friends with benefits, and it's just like characters that are just like cuddly and lovey and very physically affectionate and stuff like that, and trying to do more on the giving of love and helping each other kind of thing, because it's the idea of healing, right? If art can heal, it's kind of, if art could teach is one thing, but if art could heal is the best. That's kind of the goal. So I'm doing a lot. It's funny you say the magnification of that problem, because I did work on, and it's something I have to finish very soon, but as a cartoon that I worked on with a friend about cognitive distortions.
Uh-huh.
Like, let's make a cartoon, but yeah, let's do something about mental health. And so we came up with the cognitive distortions as demons, and magnification and minimization are two demons called Magnificana and Minimicana, and they like just come over to you and they like tell you all this stuff and you believe it, and it like completely ruins your life.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of that project. But getting to use my art in mental health, I think, is kind of the goal that I'm working on right now, and working on a small production with a couple friends. And I pitched the idea to them, and they're just like, you know what? I love this. I want to do this. And I'm just like, whoa, this is happening. We're actually going to make something. So one of the other characters that I have, it's like, well, a lot of the characters that I have are intellectual property, and so there's issues here and there with licensing and stuff. It's like, what if I came up with an original character? Like, the only original character that I think of, which isn't original at all, is the planet Earth. Like, this is the most emo character. Like, this is the one that we have to feel the most sympathy for, and we have to care about. And like, he's sad, or she's sad. I call non-binary like they. The Earth is sad, so I started making Earth designs. I have it. I actually ended up doing a submission. There's these recycle bins that they put out at Coachella Music Festival, and I submitted my design to be on one of the recycle bins, and I was accepted. But it's just I don't know if you can see it, but it's
yeah.
Earth in a meditative pose and the cosmos, and he just says reduce, reuse, renew. So it goes like back to the idea of like the ecological disaster paintings that I used to do. Like, the weeping Ronald on the pile of trash. It's like, well, we could put Earth there instead, weeping on the pile of trash that is on him. So that character is going to be part of the production, or part of a series. Like, how do we feel sympathy or empathy for Earth now?
Mm-hmm.
So using the super emo friend kind of template to get people to care more about the Earth, rather than feeling bad about Gizmo. What if we felt bad about the Earth? So that makes me feel like a little bit better too about the art that I produce. So it's like, cool. It has an ecological purpose as well.
Right. Have you ever made a super emo friends character for yourself?
Well, I was doing a couple comics there. I just called it like the letter J, and it was a lot of just kind of, it was like Charlie Brown / Wile E. Coyote, like my failures and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, those things I don't really share too much, but it'd be kind of interesting, because a lot of the stuff is inspired by the tragic events of popular culture, but tragic events of my life too, which there aren't very many, but in any case, it's a lot of just like, oh, stupid mistakes I made, or times I like made my girlfriend cry. Um, and I guess in that sense, that's like that old thing where there's monks who whip themselves on the back type of stuff, you know.
Right.
Um, I don't know that I don't know if I should sell that or show that or what. But I guess it could be kind of cool. It's like, by the way, that's the anxiety, right? By the way, look how horrible I am. These are all the horrible sins, because that's one thing in Christianity. It's like, yeah, once you get to heaven, they just check the book or they play your life back and they show you like how shitty you were. It's like, oh man, yeah, I'm just gonna beat them to the punch and just draw out everything terrible that I ever did and that I feel bad about. But yeah, but I mean, again, like, just it all is inspired by my sadness, my emotional experiences.
How has doing this kind of series of doing your art kind of helped you perhaps accept yourself, or to deal with your own mental health stuff as we sometimes have?
It's fun when people just like come to my booth and they're just like, "Are you okay, bro?" Like, and I'm just like, "I'm a lot better now," you know, because my early depression was just being kind of stuck in a job, and like when I painted that Tony the Tiger, I was like, I'm just gonna go work somewhere, be miserable. Like that was kind of the feeling of that painting, like working somewhere and just being miserable and not having freedom and just being, working on terrible things. So I was pretty bummed out, like when I was just coming out with artwork. But as they sold and people loved it, and I quit my day job and I started touring the world, I was like, all right, depression is cured. Like I'm happy now. So there was this whole like kind of false sense of security or mental stability in that. But then I realized through my relationships with women mostly, with that, like, well, not everything is perfect. I still get depressed over how my relationship isn't going all perfect and all that kind of stuff, and how it's falling apart. So I do feel like I said, with my, because I feel like I'm out of my depression that I had for like right when COVID started, basically. It was kind of like, well, that was a COVID related incident,
Mm-hmm.
But I found myself also getting into succulents and landscaping, and I became a carpenter, and now I'm like learning welding and trying to become a contractor and getting into real estate, trying to do the bigger thing, because after 7 years of the conventions, I was kind of starting to hit a wall.
Uh-huh.
And I'm bored. And I'm like, hey guys, it's me again. Like, okay, what do you have this year? I'm like, well, not a lot of growth. I'm kind of going a little stagnant, So I could see that coming up. It's just like, well, what is my value? How am I proud of myself? Am I accomplishing what I want? Because it was kind of a been there, done that situation right before COVID hit.
Uh-huh.
That really pushed me to like, well, let me go learn new things, and mental health is being one of them, and understanding myself better during this depression, and understanding like, why am I reacting like this? Why is my behavior so weird? And
Yeah.
feelings are like all over. Like I'm scatterbrained, I'm ruminating, running away. So yeah, I didn't barely do any emo friends during this time. It was just kind of dealing with being outside and trying to just clear my mind. So, but it's good, and like I feel a lot better. I feel wiser. Like I've grown. So going back into conventions again. I just had one a couple weeks ago in Anaheim. It's just like I was so happy to be there again. Like I remember feeling a little like like too cool for school in the day. I'm like, oh, I didn't make as much money as the year before. This is, not good. And this year, I'm just like, hey, I'll take anything, guys. Like, I'm just happy to be here.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't all that I am. There's more to me. I'm pushing myself in new directions, and new art forms like carpentry.
Right. Do you find that same kind of moral validation or moral character is tied to the carpentry as it has been to art, or has there been a change since your kind of COVID?
No, that's changed. I'm not relying so much on that, as much. Like, I'm doing landscaping and building things, and it's great because I don't know, there's like a weird thing, I guess, because for me as an artist, like the guy, if he's not a cool guy, like, then I don't know. I guess he gets a little bit of forgiveness here or there, but if it's just like a contractor, and like I feel like nobody cares. Like if a contractor goes home and beats his wife or whatever, it's like, hey man, you're just here to build this thing. I don't care what you're doing outside of here. But if somebody was like, yeah, can you believe the guy who laid the cement is like a crackhead or something? It's like, I don't think the crackhead cares or whatever. It's, in my mind, it's just different. Because maybe to me, I don't consider the much of an artistry to it, as the more I'm practicing and getting into the field, I can understand that, well, like a good personality is going to be the most successful aspect regardless, like even in real estate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, every real estate is going to have a good relationship with people. So I recognize that relationships are very important. And I think outside of all that, that's kind of what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not I'm perfect, but if I can manage a relationship in a healthy way, and that's something that is pretty fresh for me.
Yeah, kind of taking on some of the positive aspects of the ownership of the relationship. I also noticed that there's a lot of actually before that, I could certainly see there being excuse me, art being more vulnerable perhaps than laying bricks, or if that's something you're doing in that day, but having it be so intimately tied is it like, gosh, it puts a lot of pressure on art.
Yeah.
Have there been other things you've done or other things you've done that have helped create that separation, where to kind of create you more as this emotionally independent person from the things that you're doing or the things that you're producing?
I don't know. I really think that I need to put myself into it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really imagine making something without my feelings into it. There's a lot of, I always ask myself why, like, why am I going to do this? Why am I going to paint this or create this? And I mean, the landscaping and all that carpentry stuff just kind of became therapy for me. Just to get my head out of my own head and out of everything that I knew. Right. I needed to put myself in a space where I knew nothing, so I could fill my head with like new knowledge and be humbled, and also just like, oh, cool. Well, I have to think about this now instead of that. So I did find myself ruminating in the past a lot and trying to, like, make a future that wasn't going to happen. And so I went into those spaces just to get some fresh thoughts and fresh creative inspiration. And I think that's what helped the most for me.
Right. I mean, it kind of sounds like that you intentionally had a separation there, kind of doing something that was out of your comfort zone, or doing
Yeah,
something out of your whatever, and kind of letting it be its own thing rather than it being having to be a reflection of who you are.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm landscaping in this backyard right now, and I'm just kind of using found objects and just being resourceful and just trying to make things nicer and make things habitable. Um, I think one of the big things that happened that I kind of left out was that there's this video game called Animal Crossing that came out during like right before COVID,
Right.
and that that affected me tremendously because in the game you're just supposed to like chop trees and make benches and stuff and pull weeds. And I live on this property with like this huge yard, and there's just like scraps everywhere from people that used to live here. And I was like, I can do this outside. I can do this in real life. I went out and started doing that, and it brought me so much joy. And that's when I was like, okay, so this is the thing that I need right now, you know. And that's how I ended up getting into the landscaping and carpentry. I got a job making critter cages and garden boxes uh, for somebody, and it was just a great time to not like just kind of step away from the emo friend scene because I needed a break from it. It's been like it had been 10 years of me just doing that and focusing on that. So I felt like, hey, this is as much as I got in me. I don't know what else to do.
Right.
So I ended up just learning new things, and now that the cons are opening up again, there's all sorts of new material obviously coming out all the time, but I'm not pushing it as much as I used to. Like, I don't paint as much as I used to. So I think that the art is kind of going to start going into more production and more distribution. We'll see how it goes, but yeah, mental health is definitely part of like the whole picture.
Right. Right. Well, is there any advice that you would give to artists kind of getting started or trying to find their voice, and perhaps them struggling with their own mental health? Is there anything that you would say that would help them kind of maybe short circuit some of the process that you've had to go through?
Yeah, it's I talked to so many artists in my life that I know that are so talented, or it's just like it seems unfair sometimes. Like my friend, he's an artist too. He just kind of like asked me one time, like, aren't you afraid of this? Or like, I don't know what it was really, but kind of just said that fear was his like big thing, and fear of failure or whatever. And I was like, well, I don't know. I don't have any fear. Like, that's probably been the best thing for me, like this unhealthy lack of fear in everything that I do. Um, and so when I find that artists aren't producing what they want, it's probably because of fear. They're afraid of what people will think, or they're afraid it's not good enough. Um, so I would say, like, well, if, the advice is like, well, are you afraid of anything? Because that might be like the first step of like just starting to create. Um, because for me, I've been just doing it my whole life. It's not been any problem for me at all. Um, and other artists that are like doing these amazing drawings setting their stuff out, but they don't want to talk to anybody, and they're like really shy, and like that's still good. Like we don't have to talk. Like, here, I'm buying your art. Like, it's fine. So like you can still be successful. Like you can also find somebody to help you, somebody that you trust. It's like, hey, like I really want to do something with my art, but I don't want to go out. Like I don't want to show in galleries. It's like, well, I'll be your manager. Yeah, let's take your art and I believe in it. Let's see what happens. Like, so always you can find somebody to help you, and or you could overcome, just understand what you're afraid of. Yeah, I think it's mostly what I kind of run into. I know one person, a friend of mine who used to work for me, went through a transition, to be from Melissa to Max. It's such a great artist, and dealing with a lot of depression too. But I was always just trying to encourage him, like, man, I wish you would make a comic of your like transition. It's like that's a story that nobody out there is telling. Like, like imagine you could be like the first graphic novelist to have like a transition comic. Like you can do this. So that's the other thing too, is like every artist has their own voice. Don't copy somebody else. I mean, probably use some training wheels. When I was a kid, I used to copy Garfield comics, but I would change the characters, but I'd keep the same punchlines. But I drew them differently, But it's kind of like the artists out there have something that nobody else has, and has a voice that nobody else has, and style, or even like a sense of color. Like, I know one artist is painting flowers and stuff, and it's like, oh, how original, right? But the colors she's using are just like so cool. And like, I've never seen anybody use those colors, in that combination. So yeah, definitely embrace being different, but embrace, like the writers say, write what you know, stick to your truth. And I think that's how my art became successful, was that it is actually like how I felt.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some brilliance in that, and absolutely some truth in that for you. It sounds like, from hearing your story, and being able to see the struggles that some of these characters are going through, and being able to acknowledge that for them, and perhaps even how that has then helped you to acknowledge some of that for you.
Yeah, so. And just kind of reminding that, like, hey, everybody's got feelings. So don't forget that, and kind of be there for that, help them, ask how people are doing. It's just it's a real thing that we're just fed so much media. Part of the production that we were brainstorming on last night, I was like, yeah, we have to be punk rock. We have to tell these kids that everything on TV is a lie, and they're just trying to sell them happiness, like you don't see the reality unless it's a solution to it. But if we could just remember, like, we're all sad about something, and it just equalized, the great equalizer,
Right. And I'll definitely encourage folks who are listening to this to check out Super Emo Friends. Just Google it, or I'll put some stuff up on the website, because I think it's tough to wrap your head around what it looks or what it is unless you kind of see it. And I think once you see it, it's very understandable. It's very relatable with a lot of the characters. I showed some to my daughter last night, and she thinks they're adorable. Awesome. I don't think she quite gets the depth of some of the characters, but that's fine. So
she'll figure it out eventually. But it's fun to be at the conventions, and all the kids come up and they're like, "Why are they so sad?" And the parents are like, "You don't get it, honey. You have to. Won't get it for a while."
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say my daughter doesn't get it because the world hasn't broken her yet.
Right.
She's still optimistic and hopeful.
Yeah, and that's kind of the theme of like the next production is like, that everything is life is pain. That here are some tools to help us get through it.
Right. I mean, if and when that does get completed, I'd certainly love to see it. I mean, hey, I'd love to see the those cognitive distortion examples.
Yeah, I did tell my partners last night that, hey, I have some friends that work in therapy that I'd love for their 2 cents. I'd love them to be editors or something, like we show them our ideas and they like give us more ideas or something. But either way, like I do feel like it's really important to share this and get feedback from people with the actual book smarts on this. Like Jenny Foss, I mean, there's so much that she, just going on a camping trip with your sister-in-law and seeing her interact with her kids, I'm like, I don't see that kind of parenting. I don't see that. Not familiar with that type of parenting, and it just blows my mind, like how we can talk to children and how we can talk to each other differently than we were all brought up. So,
well, I'm eager to see where that kind of kernel of an idea goes, but I will weigh in my 2 cents. Not that you asked for them, but I have some ideas now that you're mentioning that. But either way, I know I should probably release you back to the wild, and I appreciate you sharing. Is there anything else that you'd want to add at this point to share about maybe your experience or any final thoughts?
No, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that my artwork has given me this opportunity to talk to you about this, and for your audience. I'm grateful that that I can share my story with them, and that it's a great thing. That I hope that I can keep continuing on this journey and speak to other therapists too, and hopefully, this is a new art form of making people mentally sound and healthy is kind of a nice little, wow, I didn't know my art was going to do this.
Yeah.
So, and thank you again for inviting me. It was great to talk to you again. And yeah, hopefully we can catch up after this next COVID wave passes.
Absolutely. For sure, man. Well, Jay. What? Sorry, I keep talking over you. Jay. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
All right. Take care.
All right. So regular listeners of this podcast will probably hear some themes that were consistent with things like moral scrupulosity in Jay's discussion of his own anxiety, and a little bit of magical thinking. So what that ultimately means is, moral scrupulosity is kind of a subtype of OCD where someone is, or the theme, the obsession, has to do with their morality, and then the compulsion is trying to make themselves as good of a person as possible, or else, and there can be consequences to not being the best or the right person. Kind of right meaning the doing things the way that one is supposed to do them, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, the problem with morality is that to a certain degree, a choose your own adventure, and that there sometimes isn't the right way to be. There's kind of a helpful way to be, or kind of things that are consistent with who we are. But there sometimes there are times that there are good things that we can do, and there are times that we have to violate that rule in order to do the right thing. So it can be a murky mess, obviously. So. Additionally, the magical thinking is kind of is what's called a cognitive distortion, where one has a belief about something that doesn't have any tangible effect in reality. That one thing does not have a effect on the other, but there's a belief that they do. So some of that was reflected in Jay's kind of belief that he needs to be the perfect person or the right person in order for his art to succeed. And gosh, if he wasn't a good person, that his art would somehow fail. So that for some people, it sounds like Jay had found a way to make it work for him. But for a lot of folks who may be listening to this, they may find that they are overwhelmed by this need to be the best possible person they can be, and it can ultimately be a disaster for them. So there are past episodes on moral scrupulosity if you want to go back in the archives and listen to some of those. But I talked to Jay about how we can start to challenge that connection, that magical connection. That being a good person does not immediately follow that we will be successful, right? There are plenty of quote bad people out there who are incredibly successful, and there are great people that are not succeeding. So obviously that rule does not apply generally to people, but he was talking about how that rule had got within himself and that he ran with it. Now, we can feel confident and we can approach life in a very confident way and move forward in life with personal emotional strength and integrity by being the quote best people we can be, or doing things that are right according to our worldview. But if we have a belief that we have to do that or we're going to fail, then gosh, the weight of that to be the right person, to be a good person, to be the best possible human is staggering and can be overwhelming. And ultimately, it can lead people in a false belief and false direction. So I talked to Jay about this, but some of the ways that you can counter that or by just initially being aware of how that thought is impacting you, where you see those rules taking place in your life. You can also practice things like principles from acceptance and commitment therapy. Again, knowing that there's this thought or awareness that we can be the best possible person, or we can do something just that much better, and also recognizing that the continued striving, or that endless striving to be the perfect person and do the quote right thing is endless, because there's always something else that we can do that's better or righter or kinder or more loving or more generous, etc. And that we ultimately have to be at this place of deciding, this is what I'm going to do despite what my anxiety is telling me I have to do. And then the difference between those two places is going to be filled with anxiety and discomfort and uncertainty. So we'll have to tolerate that presence of that feeling while reflecting back on the decision that you're making and deciding that this is as far as you are going to go. And over time, we can start to reorient ourselves to what we are deciding to do and what is the right direction for us. And also recognizing that just because we have that feeling of overwhelm or discomfort and anxiety and uncertainty doesn't mean that feeling is right. It doesn't mean that we are then at the risk of, social emotional sin or even religious sin or even just being a bad person. We can still be a good person even if we're not the best person. And furthermore, our success or our failure typically has nothing to do with whether or not we are a good and kind and honest person. So they are disconnected. They can be good, but they are disconnected. So some books about that. The Happiness Trap can be really good for that. Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life can also be a tremendous book on that. Self-Compassion Workbook for OCD can be really helpful for that. I've mentioned a lot of these books before. The workbook for the OCD and Anxiety Workbook by Hirschfield and Corboy is also a fantastic resource for that. So anyways, we had that conversation. So if anybody has questions why I didn't bring that up, that was why I didn't bring it up until now. So if you have questions about that or would like to add something, you can go over to fearcastpodcast.com and bring that up there. there. So anyways, I was very appreciative to have Jay on, and we'll just trail off into the outro here. All right, everybody, thank you so much for making it through this episode. If you would like a question answered in a future episode about anxiety or OCD, you can go over to fearcastpodcast.com and you can ask a question over there. If you have if you would like to be on the Anxiety in the Arts series, feel free to also go over to fearcastpodcast.com or find me over at Instagram at fearcastpodcast there, and send me a message. I'd love to hear your story, and love to hear I'd love to have you on to share your story if you were comfortable doing so. So everybody, please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you have questions and need a little bit of help, go over to fearcastpodcast.com. You can click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information up there that might help point you in the right direction. So, all right, everybody, until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.